oversees and coordinates the day-to-day operations of personnel, finance, and planning and development at the Chicago airport system. He is a veteran who served in active duty as Judge Advocate General, and he served in the Gulf War in 1990 and 1991. In addition to those airport duties I cited, our guest today also has been assigned by Mayor Daley to be the project executive of the O'Hare Modernization Program. Our guest today is a Chicagoan and a Chicago Public School graduate. He holds a bachelor's degree from Northwestern University and a law degree from the Loyola University Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago, John Harris. John?
We're going to turn the lights down. Don't go to sleep back there after this wonderful lunch. Those of you that, if you could please make your way around if you're having difficulty seeing the screen, but I can tell by the people against the back row are most intimately familiar with the information being presented today. Jay, Paul, I want to thank you again for inviting me here today, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to update all of you on Mayor Daley's proposal for the future of O'Hare. Last year around this time, I spoke to this group as part of a panel, or many of the same faces in the audience, about the mayor's proposal, and we've come a long way since that time. One of the reasons I'm back is, of course, I get a free one-year membership extension and another mug, hopefully, so I'm willing to do this each year so I don't have to pay those onerous dues. So. I'd like to begin today's presentation by reading an excerpt from a recent letter published in area newspapers by the CEOs of American Airlines and United Airlines. In part, the letter reads, "It's no surprise that airlines are adjusting priorities in light of current economic conditions. This is a prudent business move. One commitment that remains paramount and unwavering, however, is the major airline's support of the new runway configuration at O'Hare International Airport. In fact, that plan is needed now more than ever because of its impact on costly delays. In addition to helping us provide better service to our passengers, on-time flights make good economic sense." That letter was signed by Donald Carty of American and John Creighton of United. What I'd like to do today is help explain why that's the case, why this program still makes good economic sense. The FAA, who forecasts activity at our nation's airports each year, continues to hold to the opinion and the belief that growth at O'Hare will continue and will continue to be strong. The terminal area forecast reflected in the chart in front of you reflects the number of employments that are going to be accommodated at O'Hare or need to be accommodated at O'Hare over the future. Today we are approximately at about $35 million and a slight dip in reflecting the events of 2001. By 2015, we'll need the capacity for at least 48 million employments. And by 2030, if you extrapolate that out, we'll need the capacity for 66 million employments. Another metric to measure this growth is operations, or aircraft operations. The FAA believes that continued growth at O'Hare will occur over the next same 15-year period, requiring the capacity to handle nearly 1.2 million operations by 2015. Just to give you an idea, last Wednesday, O'Hare handled 2,805 operations on Wednesday alone. That's 10% more than the daily average of all of last year. Peak hour demand at O'Hare is greater than ever. But while growth is steady at O'Hare, industry profitability is not always steady. The airline industry has seen its share of ups and downs in its business. Since deregulation in 1978, the airline industry has adapted and rebounded from every economic recession or major world event, including the recession in the early 80s, which, if most of you in this audience may not remember, but some of you will, in the early 80s is when we finalized the deal with American and United and Delta Airlines at O'Hare to begin O'Hare's first major expansion program, known as the O'Hare Development Program. And I see a lot of gray hair in the audience that were not gray at the time that program was initiated. But that was in the early 80s, and in that economic recession where Chicago invested in its future to the great benefit of the region and everyone in the city. In 1991, the economy was rocked by another recession and the Gulf War. Again, the industry took a dip in its profitability, but once again, the industry rebounded and saw 9 straight years of the largest growth in aviation in the history of aviation. That was the same time when we were pouring the caissons and putting up the steel for Terminal 5. And by 1993, when we opened Terminal 5, we were ready and in position to take advantage of the tremendous growth in international traffic destined for Chicago, Illinois, the region, once again contributing to the strong economic position of our city and our state. Despite individual carrier difficulties, airports remain strong. Since deregulation in 1978, there's been over 125 bankruptcies in the industry, but there has never been an airport bond that has defaulted, and Chicago's airports continue to maintain strong credit ratings, as do most other hub airports. Another metric to illustrate the same point is the growth in employments, not just profitability. But once again, what you see here is that despite the periodic dips in activity that are associated with major world events or economic conditions, the industry bounces back, and the long-term trend is growth. Airport development can span decades. This program, our O'Hare Modernization Program, is estimated to take anywhere from 10 to 15 years. We are bound to hit a dip or a valley during that development period. So the development cycle is far greater than the business cycle. So we can't go about our business by trying to predict economic cycles or business cycles before starting programs, because we know that we're going to eventually hit a valley. These programs take a long time to implement, and as we've done before, we have invested in the long term, and it's always proven to our benefit. O'Hare needs to be modernized and ready for when the aviation industry rebounds. O'Hare, as I mentioned, continues to grow in its demand. In 2001, we once again retained our title or reclaimed our title as the world's busiest airport. By the end of this year, the FAA forecasted our operations will exceed last year's levels. We see the same growth at Midway, mighty Midway, with tremendous growth through July of this year, which exceeds last year's operations. The airlines are responding to change. The day of the $2,200 business class ticket for the last-minute traveler is gone. The new business model of lower fares is being examined and implemented across the country. But low fares doesn't mean low investment. The economics of the modernization program remain intact, and reducing delays will save money. The airlines cannot afford not to modernize O'Hare. In the letter that I read to you at the opening of my remarks, the CEOs of American United said that the O'Hare Modernization Program is a prudent business move. This next graph illustrates that point, I think, more persuasively than anything else I can say. O'Hare Modernization saves the airlines money. The program, the $6.6 billion program, is expected to save airlines and travelers over $10 billion or $10.5 billion. The same statistic viewed by a different metric of debt service over time and savings over time, illustrates again the point that reconfiguring O'Hare's runways is the most economical and practical way to address the problem of delay. Those 8 straight lines are the most important straight lines in the nation's aviation infrastructure system. So we can see that with these investments, operational efficiency will increase. With increased operational efficiency, demand will grow. And with growth of demand, revenues will grow for the airlines. So this is a prudent business move that will not only reduce their operating costs, but enhance their revenue capabilities, or enhance their abilities to generate more revenue. Investment in infrastructure is something that we've demonstrated leads to economic growth. Midway, we only have to look down Cicero Avenue for a tremendous success story of low-fare, value-oriented airlines who have invested nearly $1 billion in the Midway Terminal Development Program. That program has changed the look and feel of that airport and fueled the economic rebound in the southwest side. In 1998, Midway was the fastest growing airport in North America. We simply can't build it fast enough. You hear that, Dick? And with growth of the airport come permanent jobs. Southwest Airlines is responsible for over 2,700 jobs today at Midway, and ATA's miraculous growth is going to contribute over 2,600 jobs by the year 2006. And that's just the direct jobs on the airport, not the thousands of jobs that are induced by that economic engine down on the southwest side. Aviation growth in Chicago area is inevitable, and we're moving forward with O'Hare modernization to ensure both airports are ready. How have we been moving forward? Well, we opened the program office for the O'Hare Modernization Program on Higgins, just east of the airport. We've launched the O'Hare Land Acquisition Program and continue to buy land on the north side. By the end of 2002, we hope to have acquired 30% of the land we need for the northernmost runway. We've kicked off the environmental analysis with the FAA. We've held scoping meetings and awarded the EIS contract. Recently, we advertised for a master civil engineer. Proposals are due October 25th. I'm sure most of you in this room already know that. And in fact, I see a lot of teams being formed as we were eating. So, or what appeared to be teams being formed. Later this week, by the end of this week, we're going to be advertising for our stable of architect and engineering firms to do detailed design beyond the work done by the master civil engineer or the preliminary engineering work to be done. So that RFQ will be on the street by the end of this week. We have a very aggressive schedule in order to accomplish everything we've done. We have been proceeding on a very fast track. We recognize that the old model didn't satisfy the needs of the airlines, the FAA, or the very agitated members of Congress that often get stranded at O'Hare. This slide represents the more traditional development program that occurs with planning on the very front end in the first couple of years, feasibility analysis, preliminary design work, and to be followed then by the environmental processing, land acquisition, more detailed design, and construction. So a typical runway could take as much as 88 months to bring online. What we've adopted, as shown on the bottom half of this slide, is a very compressed parallel track method of project delivery or program delivery, where we do the financial feasibility, the design work, the environmental processing, land acquisition, and program detailing, all on parallel tracks for those elements that are not dependent on one another. We are not proceeding in a linear fashion, but rather in a parallel fashion. And I'd like to commend the members of our team who have been able to undergo this very aggressive and very, it takes its toll to do all of this in the time that we've done it. So I recognize Ramon Ricondo, our principal planner and the architect of the runway plan, who's in the audience, and commend him for the work he has been able to do in a record time. By the end of this year, we plan to submit to the FAA the airport layout plan. We've been working over the last year, as we said all along when we first announced the mayor's concept plan, that we would be going back and talking to air traffic controllers, pilots, and other stakeholders to refine the plan, listen to their concerns, their questions, their recommendations, and factor that all into the refinement of the proposal. We have done that. We are modeling various alternatives in simulation, computer simulation models. And we expect that all of those improvements to the plan will be incorporated into the final airport layout plan to be submitted to the FAA by the end of this year. The refinement has also enabled us to solve other problems that have been presented. This next slide is the solution to the problem of the Western Bypass Road. As we mentioned all along, the Western Bypass Road and the extension of the Elgin O'Hare Expressway are part of the region's long-term ground transportation infrastructure needs and have been on the books since as far back as the early 60s. What we've been able to do, as we said we would, is upon further development and refinement of the proposal, we would see whether or not airport land could be made available to accommodate that portion of the bypass road that would connect I-190 and 294 on the western boundary of the airport. And what we've done is determined that by pushing the terminal back slightly and by analyzing the runway lengths further, that we could accommodate a corridor 300 feet wide, the length of the airport property, which is approximately 108 acres, to accommodate a 6-lane highway with shoulders and medians that meet National Highway Safety Standards in order to spare some taking of land beyond what we have proposed to accommodate a road. The areas to the north and to the south, just to remind everybody, they are shaded in blue, are the proposed land acquisition areas in order to accommodate the runway lengths. So as long as the road doesn't conflict with our plans to modernize the airfield, we had no objection to making space available. But first we want to make sure that the airfield can be accommodated, and we have concluded that it can. Our land acquisition program, as I mentioned, is continuing to the north in Des Plaines, unincorporated Cook, and Chicago, and we are well on our way to acquiring all the necessary land. We have looked to minimize the impact on surrounding communities at every turn. Now, for those of you that perhaps haven't heard this before or have been out of the country or otherwise indisposed, let me go over again. Now, we covered why it's important to keep moving forward, what we've been doing to move forward, and I just want to remind everybody what's at stake, not just for the airlines, but for all of us in the region, in the state, and in the nation. An improved O'Hare would reduce bad weather delays by 95%, reduce overall delays by 79%, create $18 billion in annual economic activity in the region each year, create an additional 195,000 jobs for the region. A lot of people questioned that number early on, and I'm happy to say that recently an independent study by economists at the University of Illinois estimated the job creation resulting from an improved O'Hare to be 185,000. So forgive me for that slight variance, but I think we're right on the money. It'll ensure the continued prosperity for the surrounding communities, address congestion and delays on the roadways, reduce the impact of noise by approximately 49%, not only by eliminating the diagonal runways or the runways that point to the northwest and southeast, but by reducing the footprint of the area impacted by noise, but also by providing hundreds of millions of additional dollars for home and school soundproofing above and beyond our current programs. All of this at no cost to state or local taxpayer dollars, PFCs with passenger facility charges, federal funds, and airline revenue bonds would be the primary and exclusive source of funding. The FAA environmental review process has begun. The airport layout planning process is underway. We've solved the western bypass issue. We continue to purchase property and display in Chicago and unincorporated Cook. We continue to fight for our right to do the same in Bensonville, Elk Grove. The National Airport Capacity legislation has passed the House. And yesterday, similar language was included in a committee, a piece of legislation that was voted out of committee as part of the Transportation Appropriation Bill. The President has told the mayor that he will sign the legislation. The only obstacle that appears to be in front of us is that presented by the junior senator from Illinois. This is not a partisan issue. This program has the support of a Republican governor, a Democratic mayor, 343 Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. House, more than 70 senators that U.S. Senator Durbin has been able to get to sign on to the program, and 5 former U.S. transportation secretaries. The Senate, however, has a lot on its plate this season: Homeland Security, the possibility of war with Iraq, and all the appropriations bills yet to be passed. The uncertainty in the Senate makes local political leadership and who holds key offices critical to the orderly implementation of this program. Candidates have very different positions on O'Hare and its future and the importance of it to the state. All the benefits I outlined today will only be realized if O'Hare is fully modernized. The full measure of job creation, economic impact, noise reduction do not occur unless the whole program is implemented. There's been discussion by some public officials that the southern runway ought not be part of the program. Well, the southern runway replaces our current runway that runs northwest and southeast. Without removing that runway, we can't see the promise of western axis and the development of the west side of the airport. Without removing that runway, or those 14s, we don't see the reduction in the noise footprint that will relieve those communities on the end of those runways. We will not be able to see the containment of noise, nor the expenditure of additions of hundreds of millions of dollars for noise mitigation. We will not see the capacity provided for that has a direct correlation, as the economic studies have shown, to job growth and economic impact without providing for the full program. To not support the full program is to oppose it. The future of Chicago, the region, and Illinois' economic condition depends on a modernized O'Hare. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to keep you updated on our progress, and hopefully I can come back again and do the same. At this time, I'd like to take your questions.
We have a microphone. Ms. Saxon is always the Lawrence Spivak of the operation, going to be the second questioner because Professor Green has 2 questions. One, a very simple one. How do you come up with these numbers, like 927? Who decides that?
Well, we're going to make sure that every time you come through the airport, we're going to take your shoes off.
That would be 10 and a half.
Those numbers represent the pilot's heading, 9 being shorthand for 90 degrees and 27 being shorthand for 270 degrees. So,
All right, I don't think I was the only person who didn't know that, okay? All right, serious question now. That was pretty serious, too. Before we get to Joyce, and just because you folks in the back are in the dark, don't worry about it. You can still ask a question. Does it make a difference, a major difference, who is elected governor on November 5th to this project?
well, let me start off by answering that question by saying I'm not a politician. My job is to execute policy. And I believe the positions of the future state leaders in important offices as the governor and the Attorney General's office matter a great deal, their positions. The legislation that we are seeking in Washington that would preempt certain state laws that have been used to preempt O'Hare modernization for decades has not yet passed. And I think it's important for voters to know the positions of the candidates for governor, attorney general, and otherwise on the question of O'Hare modernization. Without that legislation, those office holders are going to have a lot to say about O'Hare modernization. Even with the legislation, it's much easier to get this implemented, at least it would be for me, with the cooperation and full support of our state's leaders. One candidate has co-sponsored federal legislation and fully supports the entire modernization program. Another candidate has not. In fact, initiated lawsuits against us to frustrate our efforts to improve O'Hare when he served as state's attorney, and hasn't joined, or hasn't gotten on board, if you will, with the modernization program to date.
Okay, that's an answer from a non-politician. Joyce Saxon, go right ahead.
All right. I'm on the board of Governors of City Club, and your last comment does lead to this. As anybody who's read a newspaper or tuned in broadcast today knows, we had a very spirited discussion between the two candidates, Lisa and Joe, yesterday at the City Club, candidates for Attorney General. Now, has Joe Burkett's opposition really made any significant, has it done any damage to the improvements in your plan?
Well, I read the accounts of yesterday's City Club debate as well, and was a little confused by Mr. Burkett's position on O'Hare. I'm not sure what his position is, because as recently as last week, before the Illinois Supreme Court, his office continued its fight against the City of Chicago's efforts to improve O'Hare in the case that was argued before the Illinois Supreme Court last Thursday. So either he doesn't know what his office's position is, or he's misrepresenting it. But if he in fact does not oppose O'Hare modernization and improvement, I would ask and call upon him to be more clear on his position.
More questions? Or you could just yell that out. Go ahead. Say, some of us don't know who you are. Some of us, of course, do.
Bert Doctor, South Suburban Airport. John, we talked about the plan, or you talked about the plan. I'm sure you referred to the modernization plan, that deal struck by Governor Ryan and Mayor Daley a year ago to not only modernize O'Hare, but do some other things in aviation to deal with capacity as well. Part of the plan is the South Suburban Airport in Peatone. I know you didn't mention it today, but we're under the impression that Mayor Daley is in full compliance with that and is working with the governor to make that fruition as well, so that capacity can be dealt with on a broader scale in northern Illinois. Is that still the case?
Repeat.
I'll repeat the question. The original agreement between the mayor and the governor and the proposal was a very comprehensive one. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, and included not only the modernization of O'Hare, but moving ahead with expedited review of South Suburban Airport and support for a South Suburban Airport. That is still the mayor's position. And we expect the legislation will ultimately reflect the full breadth and scope of that agreement.
Any other questions? Yell it out.
Bob Snyder from Elko Village. I've been a resident for 40 years in Elko, and I've been in business there for 30 years now as an electrical contractor. Expansion of it is very important for my business, but the question I really have is, on the land acquisition in Bensonville, how big of a stumbling block is that on being held up in the courts now? Is that going to hurt us down the road, or is it going to be settled, do you believe?
It is an obstacle to the development of the South Airfield. Most of all the land we need for the North Airfield is not the subject of the injunction, but there are people in public positions, public office holders that are exercising every means at their disposal to delay, frustrate, and otherwise obstruct a program that is going to generate thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of economic benefit to the region, a time that we could need it more than ever. The mayor, when we announced our land acquisition program, was very concerned about homeowners in Bensonville and other communities that are identified as part of the acquisition area, and told us to do what is necessary to take those homeowners out of limbo. Don't let them not know what their future is or not be able to control their future. So we announced the land acquisition program earlier this year so that we can begin to buy homes for those people that wanted to sell to us and get about the business of their lives, schooling, family, and other issues. The lawsuits that have been brought against us by Elk Grove and Bensonville have effectively kept those homeowners in limbo. The issue argued before the Illinois Supreme Court last week goes to the underlying state law being relied upon by our opponents. We're hopeful and optimistic that we will prevail, but it's just a delay tactic, and it's one that if our future state leaders are not supportive of O'Hare, can continue to try to use the courts and other maneuvers to try to delay. I don't think it'll ever succeed in the long run, but certainly a delay is not something we desire and not something the region needs.
Any more questions out there? Seeing none, Mr. Harris, I have one final question. So I don't want this to be and it has to do with the number of homes that are in play. Because we use Bensonville, we use the communities, we don't use the number of homes. Could you just, I have a two-part question, the moderator, okay? Two-part question. How many homes are we talking about that are under the suit right now? What are we talking about? Approximately.
The majority of the homes we need for the expansion program are in Bensonville. It's approximately 500 homes, about 6 homes up in Elk Grove area, Des Plaines area, that are not part of the objection. So it's 500 homes, and I'd like to contrast that with other airport improvement projects around the country. Most recently, Louisville, Kentucky, St. Louis, both are expanding, adding runways, and require the taking of over 5,000 homes. So as I said earlier in the presentation, we've designed this plan with a view towards minimizing the impact on surrounding communities, and we're going to pay them fair market value plus all their closing costs, legal costs, moving costs, as well as an additional stipend of up to $22,000 to help them find comparable housing.
Well, you took away my second question. But you may not know this, but probably do. There was not a single expressway ever built in this city. Any of the expressways that were the gateways to the suburbs that came, you know, that quintupled 10 times the amount of homes were destroyed or bought or whatever for every single expressway. Each one is vastly more than for the O'Hare Airport. I just thought that point is kind of important. So be it Edens, Kennedy, Ryan, Stevenson, Congress, they all took in far more homes in Chicago and the suburbs to build the expressway system, which I think we all would agree has been pretty important for the economic development of this region. Little fact for you. And besides that gift, as always, another ongoing membership. Hey, Jay, you think we'll ever get a buck out of this guy? Here's a member. And a mug.
Thank you all.